The similarities between the 2008 financial crisis, the birth of Bitcoin, and the 2000 horror film Final Destination are so stark, it borderlines on outright eerie. In this video, we will look at this uncanny metaphor and why the nightmare for the global criminal banking cartel may have only just begun. Allow me to explain. The film Final Destination centers around a group of American teenagers who are about to embark on a trip of a lifetime. However, shortly after takeoff, the plane develops fatal problems, resulting in a horrific explosion and the death of everybody on board, or so it seems. As it turns out, this was a premonition from Alex Browning, the lead protagonist. He panics, freaks out, and him and his friends are thrown off the plane. Back in the airport trip ruin, the plane takes off without them, but shortly afterwards the premonition comes true and they watch as the plane explodes on takeoff. As they commemorate the dead, they go back to their own lives, and whilst they may have got a second chance at life, unfortunately for Alex and his friends, they are about to discover the horrible truth that you can't cheat death. Slowly but surely, death creeps up on them, stalking them in the shadows as they go about their daily lives. They remain oblivious to the danger until, one by one, death starts to take them. Desperate to stop the inevitability of their own deaths, they discover that death has a specific system designed just for them. The real fight for survival begins, but there is nowhere to hide. Death grows in strength, relentlessly hunting them. They start to see the writing on the wall. It dawns on them that this is a road they have never been down before, and this is something they may never be able to stop. In fact, they're about to discover the horrible truth that death is an unstoppable freight train. But here is where things get interesting. In this version of the story, we're going to make some distinct changes to the cast. Lead protagonist Alex Browning is going to be playing ex-Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson. Alex's friends will be playing the Anglo-American banks and CEOs. The plane will be representing global real estate and stock markets. The other people on board the plane will be representing the general public. And yes, death. Death in this story will be played by Bitcoin and the blockchain. This story starts in late 2007. In response to the 2000 tech bubble crash, Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan has slashed interest rates. In doing so, he initiates a subprime mortgage and housing price boom. Essentially, he is telling the bankers, go enjoy yourselves.
So, 17, on the loose, senior trip with your friends in Paris, 10 days in the springtime. Live it up, Alex. You got your whole life ahead of you.
Carefree, in high spirits, the bankers leverage up, securitize debt, cream off fees and pump markets to record highs. But as they enter the airport, something is playing on the mind of Hank Paulson. As well as seeing French megabank BNP Paribas raise the alarm on toxic subprime debt by suspending withdrawals from their investment funds, he also sees UK bank Northern Rock collapse, initiating bank runs that threaten its solvency. He knows something is seriously wrong, but doesn't believe that US banks are at risk from contagion. He makes his way over to the check-in desk. Behind the desk is French Finance Minister Christine Lagarde. She provides him a warning and comments,
When? September 25, 9:25. Your birthday is the same as your departure time.
The significance of this date? It marks almost to the day the top of the global stock markets in 2007, before the subprime crisis crashes global markets. Ignoring the unfolding crisis in Europe and still with animal spirits, Hank Paulson and the bankers continue on their trip. However, lightning and thunder foretell of worsening economic conditions and increasing subprime delinquency rates. Hank senses the growing risk. Regardless, the markets continue to accelerate faster and faster, climbing to new highs. Oblivious to the risks and euphoric at record real estate prices and stock markets, the public cheer, clap and laugh as the markets climb to full altitude. Everybody celebrates, enjoying the good times, flipping houses left, right and centre and loading up on debt. Hank Paulson, though, he knows the truth. The subprime crisis can no longer be ignored, but still the markets climb higher. And then something unexpected happens. Bear Stearns develops liquidity issues. Governments panic as the crisis flows into full swing. The markets start to get turbulent, dipping in altitude. People look around in disbelief that this could possibly be happening. The mainstream media tries to ensure everyone that everything is AAA okay. Finally, central banks drop interest rates, turbulence slows, and everyone breathes a temporary sigh of relief. But the worst has only just begun. Delinquency rates skyrocket and the real estate market is flooded with sellers. A wave of foreclosures spread across the nation as Bear Stearns collapses and stock markets plummet. As the public's worst fears are realized, joy turns to despair and chaos engulfs the markets. People scream and panic at their impending insolvency. As the market bubble depressurizes, people scramble for the exits. The Federal Reserve continues to drop rates, but it's too late. The capital markets are disintegrating. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac go into receivership. Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy, and the Dow records its biggest one-day drop in history. Then, the credit crunch hits. It sucks all liquidity out of the capital markets. This cripples and wreaks havoc in the global economy as growth hits a brick wall. Finally, the markets cannot take anymore. They crash and explode in a horrifying fireball of destruction. Nobody on board is spared. This is the metaphorical plane crash of the 2008 global financial crisis. A crisis caused by a reckless banking system that wiped out 40% of the average American's net worth, created a huge global recession, and turned out to be the final nail in the coffin of the free market. But there is something seriously wrong about the ending of this story. You see, just like Alex in the film, Hank Paulson suddenly awakens and realizes that the subprime disaster is going to hit the US. He panics and warns government officials that action needs to be taken to save the banks. He fights for $700 billion in bailouts for his friends, warning disaster if they are not saved. Hastily, the biggest global bailout in history is passed, and Hank and his friends get bailed out of the plane. Saved by taxpayer bailouts, the bankers sit back in safety as they watch the balance sheet of sovereign countries the world over blow up, leaving them with unsustainable debt and the beginning of a lost decade. Shortly after, the bankers are quizzed by government officials on their involvement with the crash. What did they know, and when did they know it? But due to the revolving door between government and Wall Street, criminal prosecutions are replaced with slap-on-the-wrist fines as the biggest financial crimes in history go unpunished. All around the world, too big to fail has become too big to jail. There is no accountability or responsibility. The bankers have become the untouchables, and the rule of law ceases to be.
I know you didn't blow up the plane.
After walking free, moral hazard runs pandemic. The bankers bury the free markets, and alongside them, Main Street is laid to rest. Inequality explodes due to central banks, artificially low interest rates, and monetary stimulus that fails to reach the grieving Main Street. It appears that the bankers have cheated death. But this worldwide unaccountability and egregious injustice has not gone unnoticed. Shortly after the financial crisis of 2008, the Bitcoin blockchain is born. Whether through coincidence or not, the timing of Bitcoin is somewhat symbolic, and having just witnessed the carnage of the 2008 financial crisis and the lack of accountability, Bitcoin is not happy. In fact, Bitcoin is not happy at all. It's poetic that just as death is a nemesis of the teenagers in Final Destination, Bitcoin and public blockchains have become the nemesis of the bankers. Shortly after Bitcoin is born, the S&P 500 hits a low of 666. Is this a sign of things to come? Some say capitalism without bankruptcy is like Christianity without hell. The biggest black swan in financial history has arrived. The too big to fail banks are about to find out that this time they can't cheat death. Preoccupied after the 2008 crash, at first the banks failed to see Bitcoin slowly creeping up on them. It keeps a low profile, stalking them in the shadows, as if waiting for the right moment to make itself known. Catching glimpses, they become aware of its presence, but shrug it off, ignoring the danger. Bitcoin begins to grow in strength. Ignoring this new threat to their business models and their very existence, it's back to business as usual for the banks, and after cheating death, they feel more invincible than ever. They ratchet up their reckless behavior, Spurred on by QE that injects more and more stimulus, they dish out unjustified bonuses, committing LIBOR manipulation, forex manipulation, gold and silver manipulation, facilitating terrorist and drug money laundering, and countless mis-selling frauds. The bankers are out of control. Moral hazard is everywhere as they continue their reckless behaviour with Main Street. But just as before, this behaviour has not gone unnoticed. Bitcoin continues to grow and the price begins to climb. As cracks appear in a legacy financial system, and with the recent price surge, bankers start seeing sightings of Bitcoin all over the media. It dawns on them that Bitcoin is not going away and it could become a real threat to their very existence. They realise that Bitcoin has some kind of special design that makes it powerful, and in order to try and cheat death again, they need to work out what it is.
Now what if you, me, Todd, Carter, Terry, Billy, Miss Lou messed up that design for whatever reason? I saw Death's plan, then we cheated it. But what if it was our time? What if we're not meant to get off that plane? What if it still is our time? If it is, then it's not finished. And we will die. Now, not later. Unless we find the patterns and cheat it again.
The too big to fail bankers desperately analyse Bitcoin's design to work out how it intends to kill them. They start looking at the technology behind it and they realise that it's based on some kind of sequential interconnected blocks. They compare it to their own centralised infrastructure and then it hits them. Bitcoin intends to kill them by using a distributed ledger called blockchain. They desperately need to figure out how to control it. Trying to cheat death and determine their own fate, the bankers come up with the idea of playing death at its own game by creating their own private blockchains that they can control. They head out to an isolated cabin with a walled garden. Access to the outside is sealed up and anything remotely dangerous to them is padded, taped and covered over. Nothing can get into the house without their permission. Thinking they have found a way to defeat Bitcoin, they start with the arrogant rhetoric.
You tried to capitalize, but I caught you. You fuck. Not forever, but I got this cabin rigged to beat you now.
But it's too little, too late. Whereas once the capital leaking into Bitcoin could be measured in the millions, due to moral hazard and the reckless actions of the bankers since 2008, it has now become multiple billions. As the bankers sit in their dark, sterile, regulated environments, it seems that decades of manipulation, fraud, bailouts, currency debasement and financial repression has finally caught up with them. It's the beginning of the end for the banks. Their time as financial intermediaries draws to a close. After years of failing to innovate, it dawns on them that Bitcoin cares not for their private blockchains. Bitcoin is here to restore the natural order of the free market. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is that after the egregious failure of governments worldwide to provide accountability for those responsible for the 2008 financial crisis, or to hold up the rule of law, it's fallen on technology to provide citizens of the world with closure. It's time for the banks to face their final disintermediation. Bitcoin is death for too big to fail banks and the fraudulent, archaic, legacy financial system. As a competing sound money, Bitcoin is death for the monopoly on inflationary government-issued fiat currency that constantly destroys purchasing power. As a competing monetary system, Bitcoin is death for the monopoly of central bank monetary policy that has only increased wealth inequality. Through self-governance systems, Bitcoin is death for the monopoly of political governance that no longer represents Main Street and continues to erode our freedoms. And the Bitcoin blockchain is going to be the metaphorical haircut the bankers should have got in 2008, as business models are turned on their heads and financial institutions are forced to cannibalize margins. Pandora's box has been opened, and the Bitcoin blockchain is a black swan the bankers didn't see coming. They can try to create private and permission ledgers, they can lobby for regulations to delay their deaths. But the truth is Bitcoin and public blockchains are here to stay, and this time they can't cheat death.